Talk in 2014, our very own Benson Hoagland gave a definition that I like a little bit better. It's very simple. The ability of things to sense, communicate, and control. Now you may ask yourself, wait a minute, we already have that. We're all involved in industrial automation, control, instrumentation, and we've been collecting data and analyzing that data for some time now. So we already have this, but there's a very specific difference between traditional SCADA, HMI, operator interface terminals, data acquisition. And the difference is that in those systems, which the IT world has labeled us as operational technology systems, so things that are, let's say, on the plant floor. And in that, data is typically on islands, and it's typically moving around with proprietary or industrial plant floor protocols. Perhaps on occasion that data is being moved, and sometimes with great difficulty, into MRP or ERP systems. In the IoT, we're talking about applications that deal with IT and business systems, and typically there's a business driver or a goal that is driving the use of IoT technologies. And we're talking about things that start with a business goal but come into the IT department and people who are doing web applications, cloud services, software as a service, etc., for the purpose of some sort of business intelligence. And with IoT applications, the goal is to exchange data with plant floor systems. So really the difference is data. And that is actually the promise of the IoT. When we ask ourselves, is this a vendor-created solution that's looking for a problem? It's not that. The promise of the IoT is data. Data is an asset to the enterprise. So acquisition and analysis in real time. The goal of the IoT, or the promise of the IoT, is to be able to take data, and in our case, plant floor data, to make better business decisions, improve processes, tune systems autonomously, predict failures before they occur, do things like preventative maintenance. That's a big one in the IoT, as opposed to scheduled maintenance. Decrease downtime, reduce costs, increase profits. So it's really about data. And building on the difference between traditional industrial automation, SCADA, and HMI, and the IoT is there's a lot going on around data science. So in our world, in industrial automation, typically we're looking at single data points standing alone, and we're monitoring them, and we may be alarming off of them, we may be triggering off of them, but data science takes data and does much more advanced analysis of that data, and that's what it's really about, is deriving some business intelligence or some business outcome, whether that be improved efficiencies or reducing costs by analyzing data. Now, this slide is very scientific, and it basically kind of gives you an overview of what data science is all about. The good news is we don't have to be proficient in data science. Our goal is basically to get the data to the tools that can do regression analysis, clustering, etc. But it's good to be familiar with data science in the context of what is the promise of the IoT. And it's really about data. It's about machine learning. It's about supervised learning. It's about unsupervised learning. If you look at this chart here, the lower three blocks that are in light blue are kind of where we are at today in industrial automation. We do things that are reactive. We have sensors and instrumentation that is perhaps inexpensive that we run to failure, and we can replace them. We have higher level assets that we might do preventative maintenance or scheduled maintenance on a fixed interval. And we have, at the highest level, condition monitoring. We may be doing alerts on trends to monitor the condition of an industrial asset like a pump or a motor or a compressor or something like that. But typically there we're talking about a single value. The dark blue boxes at the top really is where IoT is going. And with IoT, you can take data sets and have equipment-specific algorithms for machine learning. You're looking at multiple variables in most cases. And at the highest level, we have what's called prescriptive, where not only can you predict, but you can actually prescribe remedies to prevent equipment failure and to keep machine operating most effectively. And in those cases, we're talking about multiple pieces of equipment. We're talking about multiple variables of process data that are not just coming from a single machine, but maybe from many machines, and more importantly, from the outside world. There may be data coming from outside the enterprise, similar equipment, nameplate data, typical run rates, typical failure rates, weather data, condition data, things like that. Those are kind of mashed up to a prescriptive formula. So that's the basic difference between where we are today and what the promise of the IoT is. Using data, using advanced analytical tools to get to predictive and prescriptive. So I like this very simple diagram here on what the IIoT is. And this is from somebody called Dr. Timothy Cho, and he wrote a book called Precision, a very good book. And he breaks it down very simply. And I'm going to come back to this when we talk about Opto22 products and technologies. It's things, connect, collect, learn, and do. Okay? The good news is I've been talking so far about plant floors and machines and things like that, but the Internet of Things is everywhere. There are a lot of applications happening all across the sectors in various verticals. Shipboard maritime applications, a lot going on in energy with renewables and traditional energy sources. You've probably heard a lot about smart cities. Countries like China and India are leading the way with smart city initiatives, and the U.S. is right behind. The Prime Minister of India has designated 109 cities that within the next 10 years they're going to make completely smart and autonomous. So transportation, agriculture is a very big one, but there's a lot of interesting applications going on, IoT related in the agriculture industry. And we at Opto22 have a couple of very interesting customers that we're working with already to do things like optimization of irrigation based on weather patterns and soil moisture and things like that. So it's everywhere. If you look at this chart here, you'll see that there's tremendous investment happening in IoT, and this is by industry, and this is in billions. This is the BI Intelligence survey that came out a couple of years ago, and right there at the top you see manufacturing, our sweet spot. And if you kind of go down the chart, you see other areas which we are playing well, ourselves and yourselves, utilities, mining, warehousing, etc. So the good news is this is not tomorrow. This last chart, and I promise you this is my second to the last chart I'll show you on statistics. This shows what is happening today. This is a TCS survey that was done in 2015, and what it shows is the amount or the percentage of people who've already implemented some sort of IoT initiative or technology and have realized revenue gains of over 30%. So right there at the top, we see industrial manufacturing. 19% of those 3,000 or so people who were surveyed are already realizing over 30% gains in revenue. Other sectors you see are ones, again, that are those that we play in: energy, high-tech, automotive, packaged goods, etc. Last statistical slide that I'll show you. This is a survey done by Deloitte, which shows manufacturers' top digital technologies. And it was done in 2016. And if we look across United States, China, and Europe, let's just focus on the U.S. for a second. Top technologies: predictive analytics, smart connected products, parentheses, IoT, smart factories, IoT. So my point of this is there's tremendous investment happening in the IoT. There's people already investing in technologies, and more importantly, business solutions around IoT to derive some sort of gain in terms of productivity, cost reduction, preventative maintenance, optimization. So this is happening. It's now and it's today. If you have the time, I would encourage you to do a little bit of Google searching of case studies. Again, this might seem like future technology, but it's happening today. Here, I did the same, and here's just a couple examples of real case studies that are out there. I'll just read a couple to you. Oil and gas company saves millions by replacing turbine 12 months ahead of schedule. A mining company uses data to minimize unanticipated field failures. A municipal utility uses data to minimize emissions, and so on. A train operator saves millions in fuel and predicts bearing, brake, and wheel wear. And the last two, the wind company turbine that reduces truck rolls and generates based on spot price, and a water district getting real-time data via web applications to optimize operations. Those are Opto 22 applications. So this is real, this is happening, and if you do a search, you'll find that most of these use cases not only are real and are happening and are using data in a way that is not used in traditional SCADA systems, but there is a measurable result in terms of return on investment or on dollars in cost savings. So this is happening. So the opportunities are out there. So now we kind of move to, where are these opportunities and how do we go after them? The primary opportunity that we have, Opto 22 and you, our distributors and our partners, is the fact that a major obstacle in the industrial IoT space is that there's a lot of legacy gear out there that is either A, not instrumented, there's no signals, sensors on these systems and assets, or they are instrumented, but they're kind of locked down and the data is trapped in proprietary industrial automation protocols. So that's our opportunity. We're going to build on that a little bit and tell you a little bit more on how we can position ourselves to go after those opportunities. Something very important that I'm going to talk about a few times in the next 20 minutes are that the IT companies, the big IT companies out there, those statistics that I showed you about billions of dollars being invested, a lot of that is being driven by the IT companies. Companies like IBM, Amazon, AT&T, GE, Microsoft, SAP, Oracle, Hitachi, they've all had a strong focus in data science, but as related to the IT side of things. And now they have set their focus on the manufacturing world. So they're kind of driving things, and most of them have some sort of cloud or edge platform that can ingest data and do some amazing things with that data in terms of predictive, preventative, etc. But the assumption most of them have is that all the world is digitized. They do what they do well, which is analyze data, but the reality is that most of the world is not digitized, and it must be, and in a format that they need for those platforms to be effective. And that's kind of where we come in. So what is our opportunity? The IoT needs data. It needs data from the real physical world. And as we all know, there's billions of sensors, circuits, transmitters, instruments, relays, etc. in the world today. But by design, these are either voltage signals or analog signals, and they basically do not exist to the IT world until they're conditioned and converted. And the key point, and that's what my little key is here, is that they need to be converted and conditioned into the format that the IoT or these cloud applications or software applications on the IT side understand. And we're going to talk about how we help do that. So what does this mean for us, for Opto 22, for you, our partners, whether you're a distributor and you're focused on sales, or whether you're an Opto system integrator going after applications that you can help customers with. There's kind of two areas that we could go after. There's a whole world out there of developers, okay? Our industry may seem big to us, but the world of developers who are developing software applications are probably 100 times bigger than we are. Now, granted, they kind of live in the IT world, and that's where you may have heard about this IT-OT convergence, or rather, there's a big divide. Typically, those folks don't really understand our world. They don't understand industrial automation. They don't understand Modbus. They don't understand Profibus or Ethernet IP, etc. But that's okay. That's why we're here, and that's what we're going to get to as far as what we can offer to them. But there's this whole world out there of people who are developing applications specifically for the IoT. The other is in our traditional customer base, the people we're already selling industrial automation to. As I mentioned, you're going to start to hear more and more of them talk about doing things related to the IoT that are driven by business drivers. We want to reduce costs. We want to get away from scheduled maintenance to preventative, to predictive maintenance, etc., which are typically being driven by the CEOs and the C-suite through the IT department down to the OT people or the people that we typically deal with. So there's an opportunity with our existing customer base as they look to become more IoT-centric to achieve some business goals. So that's the opportunity. So with what? What do we have to help you folks go after these opportunities, whether you're a distributor or you're a system integrator? So let's first review Opto22's 4 core competencies. I/O at the very basic level, logic, data, and visualization. So the good news is that what we have and what you're already familiar with, the SnapPack system hardware, which consists of controllers and I/O, Pack Project software, which is control programming and HMI, and Groove, a mobile interface and IoT communication tool. These are the tools that we can go after these opportunities with because of the fact that we have put in some new enabling technologies for the IoT application. So let's start with the SnapPack system, which many of you know and love. What we've done with the SnapPack system, if you're not already aware of it, is we've put in a very key technology, and that is something called a RESTful API. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a bit. But an API basically is an application programming interface. And REST or RESTful is the architecture of that API. In the Groove product, what we've done is we've embedded a new technology called Node-RED. That is a graphical user interface to do IoT applications, to move data from a pack into databases, IoT platforms, etc. So these 2 new technologies are the keys to how we will help you go after these applications. And we'll talk a little bit more in detail technically about these. But just to summarize, what do we do for the IoT? What problem do we solve? Right? We want to make sure there's a problem that we have technology to solve, and that is physical to digital, right? So what we do for the IoT needs data from the real physical world, and by design, these real-world devices and sensors do not produce data, only electrical signals. We digitize things in useful data safely, reliably, and openly. And the key is we provide that via RESTful API and in a data format that developers and IoT applications understand, and that is the JSON data format, which I'm going to talk about in a bit. Another thing I want to touch on is, as we try to help bridge this gap between operational technology and IT technology, we have to adopt some of the terminology that the IT world uses. We're now referring to us as an OT company, industrial automation, platform, machines. We never called ourselves, you probably didn't call yourselves or your customers OT. That's a term they use. Let's adopt that term. Another one is the edge, okay? So a lot of the talk about IoT is about the cloud. So these big IT companies have cloud platforms that ingest data when provided in the right format, and they can do things with that data that are very complex. They can do anomaly detection, they can do clustering, they can do trigger off of abnormal conditions, a lot of neat things. But the IoT doesn't necessarily mean we're talking about the cloud. There's issues in the industrial space with security, with data rates when you're doing remote monitoring by something like cell phone technology, etc. So these big IT companies have realized that some of the pre-processing has to happen down at what they call the edge. and the edge is basically where we live, and that is near the process. So the way they refer to our PAC, our Groove, is an edge data processing device. So that's okay. We'll embrace that technology. But I wanted to point out that a lot of what goes on in the IoT more and more is going to be happening where we already live and breathe, and that's at the edge. So the PAC in their world is an edge data processor. The Groove is an IoT gateway or edge processing device as well. So a customer, what can they do, or a developer, what can they do with a RESTful PAC? A lot of things. Basically, if you talk about an API with somebody who's kind of from our world, the industrial automation world, it may be a new concept to them, but anybody who's involved with software or the web or any kind of development knows what an API is. It allows you to exchange data directly with a database. It allows you to exchange data from a browser or web-based application using JavaScript, and really it's language independent. You can exchange data using many of the common programming languages like C, C++, C#, Java, Python, etc. You can build a mobile application, and you can communicate with cloud platforms using this tool called Node-RED, which I'm going to touch on as well. So this RESTful PAC opens the doors to a lot of people who are familiar with getting data from software applications, but not familiar with getting data from a PLC or a PAC using industrial automation protocols, but they're very familiar with an API that is RESTful architecture. So who's looking for these solutions? As I mentioned before, IoT applications might not start with the OT folks that we deal with, engineering, automation, plant operations. They may not even start with the IT department, developers, information technology people, but probably they're going to start with the business executives, the owners, the C-suite as we call it here in America, or the CEO, CIO, CTO suite, where they're trying to achieve some business objective. But the good news is, as those initiatives get pushed down, they're going to be pushed down to both departments. The OT side that we're familiar with, and the IT side that we're going to have to become more familiar with. Okay? Let's talk about technology now. What do we need to know? So at a very top level, and I'll go into a little bit of a detailed description of each of these, the terms where if you're a distributor, you're on the sales side of things, if you can familiarize yourself on a basic level with these terms, it'll be great. If you're a system integrator, an opto partner, if you can dive in and start to learn and play with and experiment with some of these technologies, I think that would be beneficial. So an API is the glue. It's an application programming interface. REST or RESTful is the architecture of the API, a set of rules that ensure compatibility. HTTP or HTTPS are basically request and response commands. They're language dependent. That's how you make a command to read and write from a RESTful device like a PAC. JSON is a data format, as we talked about, very common in the IT space. And JavaScript is a programming language for web applications. Node-RED is a visual programming tool for JavaScript. So you don't really need to be a JavaScript programmer. You can use this GUI to go ahead and develop applications for the IoT. So an API is the digital glue that stitches things together. It's the plumbing of the web. If you, for example, were to go to your favorite travel website, like Expedia or Orbitz or what have you, when you go there and you are looking for a flight, and then you see, for example, the local rental car agency telling you what cars are available in the city that you want to travel to, you see hotels saying that they're available at the rate that you're looking for. This is basically different web applications talking to each other. And the way they do that is through APIs. So the rental car agency has an API, the travel agency has an API, the airline has an API, and all these applications on the web are talking to each other and sharing data. That's what is basically the glue of the World Wide Web and how web applications talk to each other. REST stands for Representational State Transfer. It's basically the architectural style of World Wide Web. And this is a standard developer's format for writing programs that if we get into the world of developers and people who are looking to do IoT applications to get real world data, If we have a RESTful interface, which we do, a RESTful architecture, they're going to be comfortable with that, and we're going to be in a good position. HTTP or HTTPS, which is secure, is the foundation of communications on the web. It's basically two commands, get and post. That's how you if you're developing an application and you need to hit an endpoint to read or write to it, you basically use HTTP, HTTPS in whatever development environment or language you're working with. JSON, as I mentioned, is the data format. It's a RESTful data payload, a lightweight data interchange format. In the developer world, it's a leading method of data representation, and it's based on object notation of JavaScript language. And this is what we're supporting in the API in the pack. So kind of bringing that all together is if we combine these, we have the REST architecture, we have an API, we support HTTP and HTTPS commands, and we transfer data in the JSON data format. Essentially what we have, the bottom line, is programmatic access to data in the packs. Okay, and this is where we differentiate ourselves. There's no industrial automation controller that I know of that has this capability, and what we're doing is we're opening ourselves up to applications that developers kind of outside the automation world can use. Those inside the automation world are looking to connect to real-world systems and move that data into databases, into IT systems, into cloud-based platforms. So the RESTful API, HTTPS, JSON data format. For those of you who don't know, what does an API look like? Basically, what you're looking at here is what are called endpoints. So a programmer will do HTTP or HTTPS. They'll use a get or a post, and they'll either get inputs and outputs, variables, strategy, information via a get, or they'll write to it via post. I would encourage those of you who are system integrators to go to developer.opto22.com and take a look at the API there. But that's really the bottom line that's helping us. Now, there's kind of two ways that we enable the pack to exchange data with IT applications and cloud applications. One is the API. The second we're going to talk about now, which is Node-RED. Now, JavaScript is a programming language for the web. Millions of people know JavaScript, and that, again, is the language that's kind of adding interactivity to web pages and allowing applications to exchange data with each other. Now, the good news is we and even our customers don't really need to be JavaScript experts, because there is a tool called Node-RED. This was developed by IBM. It's open source, it's web-based, and it's basically a graphical user interface for wiring inputs and outputs and connectivity between web applications. Let me show you what it looks like. So in the middle there you have your palette, and what you basically do is you use these nodes to get data from somewhere. You use a node to move data from somewhere, and you wire them together. It's a very simple interface. And the important part is on the left here, you see these nodes that you drag onto the palette to read a device, write to a service, what have you. The key thing is that this is a open developers environment. So there's hundreds, thousands of people developing nodes and putting them out publicly to do whatever you need to do. If you need to write to a SQL database, if you need to move data to IBM's Watson, if you need to move data to AWS, there are free downloadable nodes. And in that regard, what we've done to get us into that environment is we have created two nodes for Snappack, and one is read and one is write. So basically in this environment here, you can use a node to read and write data from the pack, and you can connect those via Node-RED to other services. So this is the graphical user interface with JavaScript kind of running underneath these nodes to move data around to applications and to IoT services. Okay, so what can you do with Node-RED? I think I've covered this. You can exchange data between cloud applications, IoT platforms, even social interaction. You can move data from a pack onto Twitter if you so desired. Historians, big data analytics. There's also a lot of nodes for traditional industrial automation protocols like Modbus TCP and others. Really anything with a RESTful API. Given the fact that we have these pack read and pack write nodes, you can exchange data with any application or service that has a RESTful API. One thing we've done to facilitate this is we have implemented or embedded the Node-RED environment onto the Groove box. So if you have a great Groove AR1, it now has, or for some time now, has the Node-RED environment built in. So as I was mentioning, the Groove is becoming a very important component as an IoT facilitator or gateway device, and we're going to continue to put more functionality into the Groove to help you with IoT applications. So keep an eye on this space, watch the space. There's going to be some interesting new developments that are going to build onto the already powerful Groove box environment. Okay, so I'm kind of going to bring it home now. I'm running a little long. I apologize, but I'm going to kind of tie it all together here, and then we're going to have some Q&A. So basically, what is our mission? What do we do for the IoT? And what that is connecting the physical world to the digital through RESTful API. So to kind of illustrate that, out there in the world, you have IT and IoT and mobile applications. You have databases, you have mobile devices, you have IoT applications. In the physical world, we have the things that we're familiar with, which are industrial sensors, instrumentation, assets, and machinery. And in between, the thing that connects those two, the key technology that we have in our packs, is the RESTful API. That's the glue, or that's the bridge between the two. So you can take an example of, you have traditional automation instruments and controls. You can wire those up to a pack, or those may be those proprietary lockdown industrial automation protocols. We can get them into the pack and make them available via a RESTful API that any application, web, local, can read and write to the pack in the data format that they understand, which is a JSON data format. Option number 2 is we now, in the Groove, which has been a tremendous product for mobility and visualization, we've now embedded the Node-RED environment, which allows us to move data with the simple dragging and dropping of a node into cloud platforms. For example, Amazon Web Services, AT&T's M2X, IBM Watson and Bluemix, Microsoft Azure. So this kind of summarizes the big picture. What we've given you is we've enabled the pack with a RESTful API. JSON data format allows you to go approach your customers and have them use their software applications or their databases to exchange data. We have the Groove with Node-RED embedded, which allows you to push data into cloud applications, whether those be in the cloud or, as I mentioned earlier, they might be running here locally at the edge, unquote, in the plant floor environment. Okay, so let me come back to the diagram that I showed you in the beginning that I promised I'd come back to. The things connect, collect, learn, and do. And my little happy face here represents where we have differentiating technology. And the RESTful API and the Node-RED, this is where we stand apart from our competition and basically make plant floor data available to all the people who are developing IoT applications to take advantage of data analytics and provide business value. And I got to say here that, you remember in the very beginning when I talked about how many billions of dollars are being spent on IoT applications, a lot of the push is coming from these big IT companies. If you were to go to IBM's website, or specifically Google IBM Watson, or take your favorite IT company and Google their name, space, and IoT, and go to their website, you'll be amazed. Companies like Oracle, IBM, Microsoft, their whole focus now is on manufacturing. They're all coming into our world and considering themselves manufacturing experts. But that's okay, because they're paving the way for us. Because remember, they assume the world is digitized and they need to get the data from somewhere, and that's where we fit in. So it's a good thing. But I would highly encourage you to try that exercise. In that regard, we've been working with a couple of the big IT companies to kind of put this message out there that, hey, you do a lot of interesting things with industrial data. You need to get it from somewhere. Are you interested in what we do? And we have successfully become partners with 3 major IT companies. That's not to say that we can't exchange our data with really any of these cloud packages, because again, they're all supporting APIs, they're all supporting RESTful, they're all supporting Node-RED, but we've been welcomed into the ecosystem or the partner programs for 3 major companies. IBM, they have their Ready for Watson IoT, which we're a registered business partner, AT&T, which has their M2X IoT platform, and Dell, which is more of a hardware play. And the reason I bring these partnerships up is threefold. Number one, as you approach your clients and talk about IoT applications or try to promote these technologies, the fact that you're working with Opto22 and we are registered partners with each of these companies lends some credibility. So credibility is number one. Number two is these companies, we're working with high-level people in their IoT programs. They have said to us that they'd be willing to engage in opportunities if it's a qualified opportunity and it's the right opportunity. Imagine going into a major company and trying to talk about getting data from the plant floor systems, and you have to talk to the IT department. If you're who you are, you're even saying Opto22's name, contrast that with if you say that, our principal is a Dell or a IBM solutions partner. The IT department is going to understand that and is going to welcome you in much more. And I would say that even if we're talking about Schneider or Rockwell or Siemens, IT departments don't know who those people are. But Opto22 being associated with these major IT companies gives us some credibility. That's point number two. Point number three is these companies, in our discussions, we've been working with all 3 of them for about a year, have said that there is a definite gap in the marketplace. When a customer wants to do an IoT application, they need somebody who understands industrial automation but also understands the IT and the IoT side of things and all the tools that I've been talking about up to this point. So they're very interested in those of you who are our Opto partners who do system integration that have an IT and an OT focus. And in that regard, so there may be opportunities there. So in that regard, many of you have probably seen a launch very recently that we did of our IoT certification for our Opto partners. And what this is basically is if you are an Opto22 certified, if you're an integrator, if you're an Opto partner, and you are able to demonstrate competency and capability in IT technologies and the technologies I've talked about today, RESTful API, and Node-RED, we have a certification program for you, and that may offer some opportunities with some of these big IT companies that we are part of their ecosystem. So if you're interested in this, please visit our website. There's plenty of information there on how to go forward. I want to close with resources. Those of you who are focused on sales, finding new business, our distributor friends, we have tons of great collateral for you. You must go to the IoT resources page. We have white papers, we have tech notes, we have tutorials, we have a very, top of the sales funnel, enticing collateral that you can put in front of your customers. We have very bottom of the sales funnel technical documents. Please visit this site. Also, we have a new video series called Automation 101. It's the workshop series. Please share these with your customers. So far, we've launched about 4 videos that are very plant floor. How do you connect a sensor and get that data into the IoT? And we're going to be building on this with a little more focus on the upstream or IoT side of things. If you are an Opto partner, in other words, a system integrator, the place you must go is developer.opto22.com. That's where we have great resources on the API, on Node-RED. We have examples, we have tutorials. Visit that site, and also I encourage you to go to the Opto22 forums. True meaning of an ecosystem is our partners helping each other. We've got a lot of great activity going on there where people are sharing their brilliant ideas with each other and helping each other solve each other's problems. So I just want to close right before Q&A, and I apologize I'm running long, but we do want to do our questions here. My call to action to you is, if you're wondering what do I do next, if you're a distributor, my suggestion to you is, as you visit your customers, start to ask about these things. Ask about preventative maintenance. Ask about data analytics. Ask about machine learning. Ask about if there's any initiatives at the company to move plant floor data into IoT platforms. And name drop those companies: IBM, AT&T, Microsoft, AWS, SAP. That's where you should start. If you're a system integrator, one of our Opto partners, my call to action to you is start to play with the tools I've talked about today. The SnapPack RESTful API, Node-RED, familiarize yourself with the JSON data format, and also start to look into these IoT platforms. We've got a great tutorial for IBM Watson. I would suggest you take a look at that. Thank you. We're going to go to Q&A now, but I wanted to tell you to save the date, September 12th. That is 2 weeks from today. At the same time, we're going to have the next in our series of these webinars, and it's going to be a technical deeper dive. Senior applications engineer Kyle Orman is going to present and show the Snap REST API with some examples. He's going to show Node-RED, and we'll follow that by 2 weeks from that time, the third in our series. So I appreciate that. Thanks for your time, but please stay on. We have some questions, and Benson is going to help me answer those.
Okay, Arun, terrific job. Once again, fantastic overview of what our position is in the IoT and some of the enabling technologies we've been adding to Opto22 products over the past year or so to take advantage of what is arguably one of the most exciting, perhaps overblown in some sectors, but certainly an exciting opportunity for us as both in the sales channel and from an Opto partner perspective. I want to reiterate your travel site analogy that you used earlier about how people are building applications through APIs and connecting things to other things, airline sites to hotel sites to you, so you can create reservations and so on. That's exactly what this is about, except doing it at a plant floor level. So this notion of being able to create new and exciting applications in the plant floor at a company to increase operation effectiveness and so on is exactly what the IoT or the industrial IoT is all about. We do have a couple of questions. Just two here. Real quickly, I'll do the first one, and Arun, if you want to do the second one, that's fine. One of the questions was, when we use Groove Server for Windows, not the Groove AR1 or the Groove Box, if we're using Groove Server for Windows, will we be using Node-RED separately? Yes, you would. The appliance approach with Node-RED on the Groove Box is an all-in-one solution, as you know. If you elect to use our Groove Server for Windows product, then yes, you would download Node-RED from nodered.org. As Arun indicated, it's open source, freely available, and you can download it and install it on that same Windows computer. But what's important here is the Node-RED nodes that Arun had showed earlier, which are both Node-RED nodes for connecting to SnapPack systems, using, of course, the RESTful API, and nodes for connecting to the Groove Data Store. Those are all 100% compatible with the version of Node-RED you would download from Node-RED's website. So yes, absolutely, you do the exact same thing. You would just install that software on your Windows box.
Thank you, Benson. How about I take the next question, and you can take the one after that?
Okay.
All right, great. So the next question, it's a great question, and it's from Sean Morris. He says, are the Ethernet ports on the Groove capable of being separated for security? As an example, I have a SnapPack R1 processors communicating on port 1 to the area Ethernet and port 2 via Modbus to company intranet as a security layer. I'm curious if we can have the Groove work in the same scenario. Absolutely, Sean, that's a great question. And the Groove box, similar to the PAC controllers, has separated Ethernet ports. There are separate NICs, there's separate networks, so it is a security feature. Yeah, thanks for asking that question.
Great, and we got a question from Herman All. Is there any difference between interfacing with Node-RED through Groove or directly to the PACs? Yes, there is. The difference simply is that when we're talking to the PACs from Node-RED, we're able to access all of the data within the strategy, the variables, the I/O, and so on. The Node-RED to Groove is to what we call the Groove data store, and this is kind of think of it as a scratchpad for Groove, in the sense that it's just a wide open data store area that I might, for example, use Node-RED to go and query an external server, let's say a weather server, to pull back the current weather. And then I'll take that data and move it into the Groove data store so I can actually build user interfaces about that weather. So this idea that I can actually build a weather application in Groove is absolutely possible through that interface. So they are a little different, and they're used for different reasons. But they're both designed to work together to create a complete application. Good question, Herman.
Okay, it looks like that's the end of our questions, and we've gone about 5 minutes long, so we appreciate you sticking with us. As I mentioned, save the date, September 12th, probably about Wednesday of next week, we'll be sending out an invite for part 2, which I mentioned is going to be a deeper dive with some technical demos. So thank you so much, everyone, for getting on. We're really excited about these technologies that we've incorporated into the PAC system, and hope they help you go after these applications in this very exciting market. So once again, on behalf of Benson and myself and everyone at Opto22, thank you. And if you have any follow-up questions, please don't hesitate to contact us. Thank you, and have a good rest of your day or evening. Sorry, we have one last question from Hermanal. Are these technologies available today? Absolutely, yes. And he's asked, when should we start to talk about them? And my answer, Hermanal, is yesterday.